folks, Rich here at RCINFORMER.com. Thanks for checking out this video on the LX models B-25 from Banana Hobby. This is going to be part 2 of a 3-part series on this airplane, guys, so be sure to check out the links at the end for the separate unboxing video and the flight demo video. This is, again, guys, part 2. I'm going to be showing you guys a lot of assembly techniques, suggestions, and tips for getting this airplane together and out to the flying field. This thing is an 80-inch wingspan, guys, has retractable landing gear with brakes, 4 flap segments, a lighting package, an opening bomb bay door, so it's a pretty complete, very large model. I put my Futaba radio there under the wing there just so you can get an idea of the scale of this thing. It's big and it's impressive, guys, but it's actually very easy to put together. There's really only like 3 major gluing jobs, and one of them is just gluing the 2 halves of the fuselage or the tail section onto the main part of the fuselage, and then gluing the wing onto the fuselage, and then gluing the bomb bay section underneath. The only other 2 glue jobs that you really do are gluing the vertical stabilizers on. And the rest of the airplane, there are some tiny glue jobs here and there, but the rest of it mostly is nuts, bolts, and screws, wiring, trimming, and tuning. Now, that being said, guys, I have a lot of really good tips, techniques, and suggestions for getting this airplane together successfully and getting it out to the flying field. Without further delay, guys, let's go ahead and get on with putting this airplane together and getting it out to the flying field. Before starting the assembly process of the LX models B-25, it's important to note that the instruction manual here is intended for both versions of the airplane. You know, whether you're building the kit version that you have to put all your own electronics and glue everything together, or the ARF version, this will cover it. For those of you doing the ARF version like I'm putting together here, a lot of this work is already done, so you're going to find yourself skipping through a lot of stuff. Now, the things that you skip through, it's not a bad idea to verify that everything is connected and secured, and because sometimes at the factory they may miss something or not put enough glue, or maybe connect something in the wrong place, so it's not a bad idea to check that out. The first step really, though, for us belongs to starts here at step 27, which is really just installing this upper fuselage light, and then as we flip the page over here, installing the canopy. And again, continue to verify that they put all these things in, like the battery strap, and that the servos are secured properly, and so forth. But we skip a lot here. We go to this section here. It's not a bad idea to verify that your 2 elevator servos, Y-harness, which they joined at the factory, are secure. It's not a bad idea to tape those or put a connector or one of those safety connectors around there. And then we start in here on the elevator. Same thing with the Y-harness for the 2 rudder servos. Not a bad idea to at least tape the Y-harness leads together that you're going to put on there and make sure those are secure, because these 2 elevator and rudder connections, you're not going to see much. They're going to be buried in the fuselage. The rest of this stuff we can skip over, guys. Wingtip lights, servo installations. Again, these are things you do want to verify and check the security of, make sure they did them right at the factory. Landing gear, all this stuff is already assembled and buried in the airplane. And you want to, again, as you open up the gear doors later on, as you're building this thing, you just want to make sure and verify that they did put everything together correctly. And if they didn't, you can, make adjustments to it. Then we get to this step here, 143, installing this lower fuselage light. You can see how much work is already done for you in this ARF version. Bomb bay doors and so forth already put together. And then here you get to step 145, and here's where most of the assembly begins, and most of this manual you can follow along all the way through. Starting off, guys, with the tail section, putting that together, gluing the rear half of the fuselage to the front half of the fuselage, and then gluing the main wing to the fuselage and the belly pan to the underside of the fuselage and the wing, and then putting in the motors, connecting up linkages and wiring, putting details like guns and putting the outboard wing sections on, and so forth. This whole thing, pretty much through the end, is the part you're going to follow. Now, let's go back to right about this part, guys, and I'll start off showing you how to get the tail together on this airplane. The first major part of the assembly process on this airplane, guys, is really just getting this whole tail section together. This airplane is really easy to put together. The first step, really, guys, is putting the vertical fins on, and you can put those on with contact cement or epoxy, however you'd like. There is a screw, okay, that's going to screw through here to screw this thing in to kind of back that up. One thing you do want to be careful of, though, is if you over tighten the screw, what can happen is this entire tail here, guys, can actually bend outward, okay, because they put the screw not in the middle of the horizontal stabilizer, but actually towards the bottom, so it'll cause that to bend. So you want to put your glue on, get this thing on there. Don't over tighten that screw, just kind of put it on so it's just sort of snug fit. And then if you can, use a 90-degree tool of some kind to line that up right on here, guys, and make sure that it is pretty much vertical. It has a taper to it, so it's not going to be perfectly lined up with it, guys. But you want to make sure both sides are the same and that your fin is pretty vertical. Once those are glued on, guys, this whole tail section here, guys, goes on real easy. It just tongue and grooves right in. You really don't even need to use any glue, although you can back it up with some contact cement or epoxy. This nice hatch is here with this big doubler and metal threads, nuts on the inside, guys, so you can screw this on. So it's a pretty secure tail. And then once this is done, guys, you put your linkages on. Now, I've already been at this with a little bit of touch-up paint and so forth, but you just put your 4 linkages on. You want to make sure that you do use fuel tubing everywhere, guys, on these linkages to keep them secure. But for the most part, guys, that's pretty much it for the tail on this airplane. One thing you do want to do when you get ready to glue this, you do want to use 30-minute epoxy on this thing, guys. And I use, as you guys know, I use these tools that I make up with sandpaper all along them. And it's a great idea, guys, to run a tool like this right along this edge, guys. And what that allows you to do is get up really close to the edge here, okay, without taking the paint off the edge, so it doesn't look ugly when you glue the two halves together. But by using sanding tools like this, guys, use the sanding bar here just to get the rough edge. You don't want to sand it too much, but you just want to scuff and get all the paint off. So this looks, so it's nice and rough, so the 30-minute epoxy that you're going to use is going to bond to this really well. There's really only like 3 major gluing jobs on this airplane, and that is gluing the rear half of the tail to the front half, which you can see right there. I'll go ahead and zoom in on that. Again, same thing, guys. You just want to roughen that up a little bit using these tools, guys, to get all in those crevices, but not getting too close to the edge here where you take the paint off. You can get pretty close to it, but you're going to use 30-minute epoxy to glue these two halves on. One suggestion I have before actually putting the tail on, guys, is to get your waist gunners guns in position. If you don't do this ahead of time, guys, it's going to be really hard. It may be really hard to get the guns in there. I found that I really just couldn't put the guns in without actually going through this hole. So again, guys, get the waist guns on first before you glue your tail on. It is important to note when gluing the tail on this airplane that you stand the airplane up on something. You can see I'm using this foam block in the middle of the fuselage to support it. And just put the nose of the airplane on a carpet or something. The toughest part about gluing this airplane mostly is just that it's big, but it's actually very easy to glue together. So once your tail's assembled, feed your wires through, set it up just like this, mix some 30-minute epoxy, and apply it with a brush, and then go ahead and put your two halves together. And let the airplane just stand like this until it's dry. Then you're ready to move on to the wing. It will make putting the wing on much easier to have this all assembled because the airplane will balance better on the stand for you. Now once the tail section of the fuselage is glued onto the main part of the fuselage, it's time to glue the wing on. Now I'm showing it to you like this just because it's easier for me to film it this way than it is with the tail on there, but you know, rest assured I'm going to glue the tail on first. Feeding the wires through, and then once the tail is on there, I'll go ahead and put the wing on. You can see how the fuselage really doesn't balance too well. It's very nose heavy, and once the tail is on there, that'll actually sort of right this thing and make it much easier to glue the wing on. Now this is a big gluing job, guys, and you do want to sand this down again. You want to use 30-minute epoxy on this thing. Use your sanding tools with sandpaper on everything. To get into all those crevices and stuff, and you want to prep it like this. It doesn't take very long to do, guys. Again, just leave enough at the edge so you don't take the paint off the edges of the thing. And then on the wing, it's pretty much the same thing, guys. Sanding it right here in the center. Again, it looks like a lot of sanding, but it's not. This paint really flakes right off really easily, and you're going to glue this top surface on in that cradle first, and then the belly pan is going to go on. Now keep in mind, guys, another thing that I did that's a real good idea is just bundle your wires here with a plastic bag or something. because what's going to happen is you're going to cradle this wing right inside here, and right in that hole there is where all those wires are going to go. You can reach your hand through the cockpit, grab those wires, pull them out, because you're going to have glue all over this thing. So you're going to want to mix up a significant amount of 30-minute epoxy in a cup or something. Don't leave it in the cup very long, because once you mix it up, if you leave the epoxy together in a big group like that, it will begin to harden much quicker than 30 minutes. So once you mix it, pour it right on here, take a brush, brush it on. You're only going to be brushing it on this lower portion to start with, this whole bottom area, and then kind of like right up to sort of here and around here. Same thing on the wing, guys. You're going to go ahead and brush it on here too as well. You got to work pretty quickly, because like I said, it is a big gluing job. And then take that wing, again, insert those wires right in through that hole right there, pull them through the front, and then just put your wing in, settle it down, clean up any excess epoxy, and then just let it dry. Make sure it's fully seated in there, and that'll be finished. Once that's done drying, same thing here, guys. You're going to take the belly pan here, which is also the bomb bay door. See how I fully sanded everything, except for just the edges. Again, you're going to mix epoxy, and you're going to put it right on top of the bottom part of the wing right here, and on this section right here. And then this whole thing right here is going to go right on, guys. It sort of just pops down into place, and now you've sandwiched your wing in there. And then just let everything dry. Clean up any excess epoxy that's along this edge, and along this edge, and along the wing, of course. And that's pretty much it, guys, for the major assembly of this airplane. Once the tail is put on, and once the wing is put on, and then the belly pan is glued on, the major assembly process of this airplane is pretty much done. The rest of it is linkages, nuts and bolts, and wiring and setup. So it's just that working with it is kind of difficult, just because the parts are very big. But anyway, guys, as you can see, this thing goes together very simply and with great ease. If you do the proper prep work with the wiring and the sanding, it'll go together very nicely for you. Now, just before gluing your wing on, not only do you want to have these wires all bundled up, but you also want to have your bomb bay door servo wire wired up or bundled up separately, because the very next thing that's going to happen is we're going to end up gluing on this lower belly pan, this bomb bay door section, and that one wire needs to be separated from the rest of them, so this thing can fit right on after the wing is glued into position. Just to give you guys a real-time demonstration of how easy this thing is to install, as long as you have your wires bundled here, guys, you're going to apply some glue here to this top surface of the wing. You're also going to apply glue into this cradle, as we previously discussed. And by having this wire bundle here, guys, it's going to make it so much easier, as you can see here, just to push this thing through the hole and reach in through the cockpit with your other hand and grab that wire bundle through the cockpit and just pull that wire bundle through. Now, you'll have glue, like I said, all over this whole area, and as you pull this thing through, you're going to very carefully just rest your wing right down there into the saddle, and you see how nice and easy that is. Again, by bundling those wires, guys, it's going to make this whole process so much easier getting this thing on. Now, once this glue is dry, the wing is going to be secured on here. The next and really the last final gluing process is going to be putting on the bomb bay section, the belly pan section here. You're going to put epoxy all over these areas that are going to contact. Same thing along here, in the areas that are going to contact, and you literally are just going to push this thing down on here. You can see how bundling those wires is going to make this thing a whole lot easier. You're not dealing with all those wires. You can look down on the bomb bay section, make sure you're not getting glue on anything. But if you take a little time, do your prep work on those wires, wrapping up everything, this whole installation, these two separate glue jobs for this wing are going to be much, much easier and cleaner of an install if you do it this way. Here's a few real important items to note, guys, before we add any glue to this entire wing section, before we glue any of this together, is that with the airplane sitting upside down like this, after we apply our glue on it, you can see that the fuselage has a tremendous amount of flex to it, and you can see the huge gap that gets created here, and there's also a gap that gets created right back here. So, and we want to eliminate that gap. So what we do is when we first put the glue on and we put the wing on, what we want to do is prepare the inside of this thing as we put our glue on, and then we put this wing section on just the way you see it, and it's getting ready to start drying, we want to have a couple of wax paper sections applied or created, so we can put them right here, here, and here. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow us to go ahead and put the belly pan on. Okay, there's not going to be any glue applied to this section, just between the wing and the top side of the fuselage there. Then, with all the wax paper put in there like this, guys, we're going to be able to go ahead and put this thing right down on there, and we're going to rest assured that this center section is not going to get glued to the fuselage. And in order to eliminate this gap that you see, guys, in this flexing, what we're going to do is immediately, long before the glue dries, we're going to actually flip the airplane upside down, and we're going to rest the airplane on the belly pan and on the block itself. And what's going to happen is now the gap that used to be right here and the gap that used to be right here on the front section of the fuselage is now gone, because what's happening is the fuselage is now, the back half is bending down, the front half is bending down, and we're eliminating that gap that we had in the front and the back. And we're going to let it dry like this. Now, this also gives us a good opportunity to clean up any epoxy that might be oozing out of here, and the wax paper is going to keep that belly pan from sticking. Now, when we allow this thing to dry for, a couple of hours or overnight, and then we flip this thing back over, now what we're going to find is those gaps that we had right here and right here are actually going to be gone. And what we're going to do is we're going to be able to pull the belly pan, the bomb bay door section off the airplane, and it's not going to be glued because we put the wax paper right there. So at that point, guys, once this thing is completely dry like this, the belly pan's now removed, we can go ahead and we can take all of these wax paper sections off, and then we can go ahead and add glue to this section, this whole section along here. We can also add glue to the belly pan on both sides of it and so forth. And now we're ready to glue the belly pan on. And then when we put the belly pan on, we're going to want to proceed, repeat the exact same procedure. With the glue on here, we're going to clean off as much as we can. And again, guys, pick the airplane up, flip it upside down, and rest it on like a foam block or something on the belly pan. And again, the back of the fuselage is going to bend down, the front's going to bend down a little bit, and it's going to eliminate that gap on the back and the front. And this is where we can take our time and use a little bit of alcohol, clean off the excess epoxy, and allow the plane to dry just like this. And this is how you want to let it dry, with both glue joints. This glue joint and the bottom glue joint, we want to allow the plane to dry just like you see it, right side up. One last suggestion I have, guys, before we put our first glue application to get the wing onto the fuselage, is to just take a magic marker or a marker or a pencil of any kind and just go around the edge here where the glue is going to go. And what this is going to do, it's going to indicate to you where you're going to apply the glue and where you're not going to apply the glue. Because for the first gluing job, you don't want any glue on any of this part, you don't want any glue on any of this part. You just want it on the wing saddle that's actually on the top side of the wing. Now, as you can see from this shot right here, guys, with the wing removed, you can see the marks that we made here, and they give us a clear indication of where the glue is going to go. So we're ready to start gluing the whole thing together now. We're going to mix up 30-minute epoxy, a bunch of it. We're going to dump it right here with a brush. We're going to brush it all the way around here. We're going to brush all the way up to these lines, guys, right here. Now, once we've done that, guys, we can put some on the wing as well. But what we want to avoid on the wing, guys, is getting any of it on the back half of the wing, back part of the wing, or even on the front part of the wing. That glue we're actually going to put on the fuselage here. If we were to put glue on the back here and put glue on the front here and then put our wing down, we're probably going to end up getting glue all over this section here and all over this section, which might glue our belly pan to this thing as we glue this thing down. So glue on here up to the line, glue on here just on the top surface, guys, not on the back and the front, and we're ready to put the wing in the saddle. Fast forward ahead, guys, 24 hours. I went ahead and glued this just as advertised, guys. I had the airplane upside down, put some glue along here, put the wing on, put the belly pan on with some wax paper, and then rested it upright like this on a block to let it dry. So I'm at the next day now, guys, after gluing this thing, and we're going to flip this thing over and see how the gluing job went. Now you have to be careful using alcohol on this paint because the alcohol really attacks this shiny green paint, so you want to use it very sparingly. Anyway, guys, I'm going to go ahead and flip this thing upside down, and we'll see what kind of job we had done here, guys. As I lift the belly pan off here, you can see all the wax paper areas here, guys, and those should easily just come right off, and that kept the again kept the belly pan from sticking to the wing or to the fuselage. So we get all this stuff off, guys, and we can see we have a nice nicely installed wing on this thing, guys. And again, the beauty of it is, guys, is that all this wax paper will keep everything from sticking, and we can put the now go ahead and glue the belly pan on. All our wires are nice and out of the way. We can glue this thing on now, flip the airplane back upside down, and let it dry. Now, one more thing you want to do before you glue the bomb bay area and the belly pan on here is to very carefully pull your wires out and remove that whole wire bundle. You may have to cut through it with a hobby knife, but you just got to be careful not to cut into these wires. But if you don't take this thing off of here now, it's going to be tougher to get it off later. Also, you'll see here I put a little bit of wax paper over the motor wires to keep glue from sticking those together when we glue the bomb bay area on. Here's a quick look at the underside of my airplane, guys, with the bomb bay door section glued in position. It's important to note that this seam right here, guys, is really nice and tight and glued securely, and this seam right here is nice and tight and glued securely. It's just real important, guys, that when you glue the wing to the fuselage, as we just saw, and then you glue this bomb bay section to the bottom part of the wing and these sections of the fuselage here, that you let it dry. You apply the glue with the airplane upside down, but you let it dry like this, with the airplane resting on a block, with the block on the bomb bay section. And what that's going to do, again, the weight of the nose section will be pushing down, the weight of the tail section will be pushing down and closing those two gaps and allowing for a really secure glue bind. So keep in mind, guys, this is a two-step process. You got the airplane upside down as we showed it, apply glue and put the wing on, and then put the belly pan on with the wax paper that we saw, and then flip the airplane upright like this and let it dry. Once it dries, flip the airplane upside down, take the belly pan off, put the wax paper on, take the wax paper off, and then apply glue to your belly pan and your bomb bay section and your wing and the front and back of the fuselage here. Put your bomb bay section back in, and then flip the airplane upright like this and let it dry just like this, the way you see it. And again, guys, that's going to give you the best bond for your wing and your bomb bay. Now, once this is done, guys, your wing and your bomb bay door section are on. The rest of this plane is really downhill from here. It's mostly attaching the motors, doing electrical wiring, trimming and tuning everything, putting plastic guns on the airplane, and really getting it the final items set up and getting this plane ready to fly. One suggestion I have, guys, for really cleaning up your airplane after the wing is glued on is to mix up some separate epoxy and create a wing fillet. And really all that is just applying the glue in the center and then running your finger along it and making a real nice joint. Mine, I had to fill it towards the front and the back, but not the middle, so I mixed some up after the fact and made a really nice seam, and you can see how nice that joint came out. Now, if you use alcohol on your airplane, guys, after the fact, it does play with the paint a little bit, and it can ruin the finish. Now, what I did before I even started building the airplane, I took the tail section over to Lowe's, had their paint department scan it, and create a Valspar matching paint for me. This paint sample just costs $3, guys. It's a little bit thick. It does tend to clog up the airbrush a little bit, and you usually have to clean the airbrush several times to do it. But as you can see here, guys, I painted a lot of areas on here, and the paint matched nearly perfectly, guys. So a real great way to match your paints on this and to create a real nice seam where these glue joints are. Now, once the major assembly of the tail and the wings are all done, it's really time to just wire this thing together. Now, the interesting thing is that big wire bundle that came from the wings into the fuselage section most of the airplane is actually already wired at the factory for you. There's really only a few things you have to connect to all that to get it going. So most everything's done at the factory. Now coming from the tail, you have the elevator and rudder channels. Those just plug right into your receiver. There's also a light on the top and a light on the bottom. This one just comes through the fuselage. This one right here on the bottom of the bomb bay or behind the bomb bay comes through the bomb bay section, and that plugs into your light controller board. And then from the front, there's only 3 channels: the retract, the door channel, and the nose wheel steering channel, and those just really plug into their appropriate places. Now, one thing I would recommend doing highly, guys, with this thing is as you connect everything and you get your brakes and your light boards and everything and door sequencing doors, boards all done, anywhere where there's an exposed metal surface, because there's a lot of wires in here, guys, I would just wrap some electrical tape around it just to insulate it. This is the brake controller board. Here's your landing gear door and sequencing board. You can see there were exposed contacts sticking around there, so I just wrapped some electrical tape around there. I put my own flap slowdown mechanism because my radio doesn't have a slowdown unit in it. I think this is a Hobby King board, but again, it had some exposed contacts, so I wrapped it up with electrical tape. Here's the light controller board, guys, with 6 lights coming in here. Again, 4 of them are already plugged in, guys, so all you have to do is really just plug in the 2 that come from the back into here. And again, it's all insulated, guys, to keep everything from shorting out, anything from contacting each other. Now, one thing I did differently on this model, guys, the 5 amp BEC that was included with the airplane, I actually removed it. I just cut the wires and got rid of it. You got to remember, this airplane has 15 digital Metal Gear servos in it. It has a lighting package of 6 lights, and it also has some pretty big electric retracts that are jack screw driven. So there's quite an electrical draw on this system, and even though this BEC was working just fine, guys, powering the whole thing, I really didn't want to rely on sort of this no-name brand BEC powering it. Now, the good thing is after cutting this out, guys, you can use this on another model. If you need a BEC on something smaller, maybe it doesn't have quite so much load, you know, I'm just putting this in my storage bin and using it for something else. And honestly, it probably would power the model just fine. But rather than go with the onboard BEC, I would suggest maybe using a Castle BEC, or do what I did. I just put a separate receiver battery in, which I'll show you later. And you can see right here, I put a separate switch in here, guys. So my electrical system, as far as my receiver battery goes, I have a 5,000 milliamp battery in there that I got from tnrbattery.com. It's an all C-cell pack, and there's plenty of room up here, and I fit mine up in the front here, guys. But it's a good idea, I think, with this model in particular, just use a separate receiver battery. It's big, it can handle the weight, and you don't need to worry about you know, losing that BEC component or having that BEC component fail on you. Now, one thing I did with my receiver, guys, that's interesting to note here, guys, as far as channel 3 going in here for the ESCs, as you can see, guys, I removed the power line, okay? So both my ESCs from both wings are coming into the receiver minus the power line, because I want to make sure there's no power going in, and of course there's no BEC. There's only the receiver battery, the separate receiver battery that's supplying power to this receiver. Alright, guys, as you can see here, all the wiring is just sort of put into the top gunner position here. I have my receiver just velcroed down to the floor here. I also have a volt watch in here. Now everything's all plugged in nicely. You can see here I ran an antenna tube. I put a hole right here and ran an antenna tube to run one antenna there. I ran in another antenna tube here, so the antennas are 90 degrees to each other. Also, guys, right here you can see the receiver switch. So now you can turn your receiver on and off, and you know, test out all your control surfaces and things like that without having your battery plugged in and everything. There's ample space in here to put stuff, guys, and then to latch to cap this whole thing off, you just put your gun on and turn it at a 90-degree angle in either direction, and it locks everything in place. So it's really nice access, guys, to this receiver and wiring compartment. Now, moving along here to the front, guys, you can see where I have the separate receiver battery. It's a sub-C pack, 5,000 milliamps. Again, I just bought this at tnrbattery.com, and like I said, I figured with 15 digital servos, retracts, lights, and all that, this plane is big. It's a bomber. It's meant to carry lots of weight. It definitely warrants having a separate receiver battery, you know, and a big one at that. You can see here the sort of the factory battery, guys. I'm using the ones that LX Models makes. It's a 4-cell flat pack. It's designed specifically to fit in there. You don't really need to put these in there, though. You can put a longer one and a thicker one going all the way down there. The floor of this compartment's pretty thick, so you actually can cut down into it just a little bit if you have a thicker battery that you need to put in there. But my battery, both of these batteries are Velcroed down there, and of course the main battery is also strapped as well. So with the foam above this receiver battery, there's no chance of any of this stuff coming out. Now, a couple things I did to my cockpit as well here, guys. I put some extra magnets on the back, and you can see here my actual cockpit, my canopy, I threw some extra magnets on there as well. So this thing actually latches down pretty nicely. Now, one thing I found was my canopy really didn't fit all that well. In fact, this back edge right here, guys, would strike and come down on the top of this thing. So it really wasn't, it's almost like the canopy was too long to fit in this slot. So I either needed to shorten this canopy or lengthen the back of this, which is what I decided to ultimately do, was sort of lengthen this. And with a hobby knife, I just cut, you can see I cut like a trench here, and cut it back a few millimeters until it fit. And also to make it fit better, I took the edges of these things, and you can see how I sort of beveled the edges a little bit and made them sort of rounded. And by rounding them off, what that does is it allows the cockpit to fit on here much better. Now you can also see I painted this thing black inside. I also painted black on the nose inside the bombardier section, and it really adds some depth and some detail to it. Also, I painted the prop hubs silver, just to sort of, or chrome, to sort of match the prop hub or the spinner nut. Now back to the canopy here, guys. You see how nicely this thing plugs in now, and with the extra magnets, it just locks right into place. And if you take your time, guys, and trim this, you'll see that this thing is like a perfect fit, and with the extra magnets it's very secure. Now it doesn't really need the extra magnets, but I decided to put them on there for a little more security in case I want to do any kind of aerobatics and things with this airplane. But for the most part, guys, that pretty much does it for the electrical system on this plane. A couple things to note about these motor mounts. Before I installed them, I realized that they were a little bit thin at these joints right here and right here, and that's on all 4 of the inside holes. After looking at some of the forums, I noticed that, guys, we're having problems with these cracking, so it's probably not a bad idea to see if you can find one of these, maybe from another manufacturer or something, that the holes are the same, and just replace it. Now, what I did with mine, I couldn't find one at the local hobby shop, so I just fabricated one here out of aluminum. I used K&S Engineering aluminum that was the same thickness, and you can see I just cut it into a square, guys. Use this as a pattern, and then just cut the 4 holes. I used a larger drill bit to just countersink these to make them fit, and you can see it's a perfect fit. Also, I noticed that there was a very tight gap between the prop and the cowling, unless I put some standoffs on here. So for standoffs, I really just used some 2 440 washers, okay, on each of these, and that gave me plenty of clearance between the prop and the cowling. As you can see here with my motor installed and using the 2 washers that we just saw for standoffs, there's now at least a reasonable amount of clearance here. You can see here that the cowling still does move a little bit, so without those 2 washers here, which only represents about 2 or 3 millimeters, this whole thing would be really close to this, and you know, your cowling could move in flight a little bit on you, so you want to make sure that there's again, at least some margin for error here. Now, as I zoom out here, a couple things to note. Securing the cowl in position. There's actually 2 screws that hold it in place, one here and one on the other side, and they're both below the center line of the motor. So keep in mind this entire cowling does move a little bit, but what you want to do is once your prop is secure, motor and your prop are secure, you want to push this cowl back as best you can and secure these 2 screws. Now keep in mind here at the top here, guys, there's really nothing securing this thing at the top, and you can see this gap right here can form. So probably prior to putting my cowling on for the final time, I'm going to put a little bit of contact cement up here before putting the cowling on. Then put the cowl in place, make sure that the prop and spinner are lined up here nicely in the center, and then go ahead and secure these 2 screws. And again, guys, that a little bit of contact cement up here will really keep this cowl from moving around too much at the top. And if you do need to get your cowl off at a later date, you can easily just sort of yank it off, and the contact cement will loosen so you can get back into your motor if you have to. For those of you that really want to go a step further in securing your cowl, instead of gluing it at the top like we just saw in the last clip, it's not a bad idea to add this third screw at the top in addition to the two side screws here. The reason for that mostly is I did have to remove mine to do a couple things in here, make some changes and adjustments, and you can see here where the glue really does sort of chew up the foam here and everything. So what I did was I took just a little piece of light ply here, guys. I countersunk it into the foam, just removed some foam, and you can see the hole here where the screw goes in. Also, below this piece of wood here, I glued on another small block, so there's extra wood threading down in here. And this all just epoxies right in place with 30-minute epoxy. Also, when it comes to the cowling itself, you can see here where I went through the thickest part here where there's lots of plastic for that third screw to go through. Now, as you can see, guys, you no longer have to worry about gluing this cowl in place if you want to go this route. Now you can positively secure this thing on with 3 screws. Again, these 2 here, the one on the top. Before you drill this hole in the top, once you get your wood put in there, the best thing to do is put your propeller on, line this thing up to make sure there's equal distance all the way around this thing, then tighten your 2 side screws, and then go ahead and drill this hole and put it in. And you can see here, by using sort of a washer head screw like I have on there, it really distributes the load. You definitely want to use at least a washer of some kind on there. But again, guys, this gives a very secure cowling and a very positive alignment on the propeller and your cowling to get this thing lined up properly every time you put it on. With the airplane flipped upside down, guys, I have a lot of suggestions for the underside of the airplane. First and foremost, the rods are tough, but they're also kind of flexible and thin. So by taking a length of carbon tube, cutting it to the length you need, unscrew your clevis, slide your tube on, put your clevis back on, you now have a rod that is not going to bend. That tube is going to keep it from bending under load, and I would do this with all the flight control surface rods. Regarding this tail compartment here, guys, you can contact cement it in place just like the instruction manual said. This accesses the wires, and it also accesses the large bolts to get the tail section off. But instead of cementing it in place, you can do what I did. Just put some rare earth magnets. I glued them in and taped them in. I made some special blocks here, guys. So you can now access this compartment to get back to the wiring, add tail weight or whatever you may need to do with it. And you can see here, guys, it fits in really nicely and it's very secure. So definitely a great way to secure that hatch. Now, as we move along here to the front, guys, also these front engine hatches, I really did the same thing. You can contact cement them in place, or again, rare earth magnets, guys. Just glue them in place. Right here on the hatch, I just glued in some washers and taped them and taped over them. And you can see how nicely these things install and they snap really nicely in place. Now, when it comes to the flaps on this airplane, guys, these are the most critical rods that you either want to make new ones or just do what I did with it, is just put carbon tubes around them. It's a little more challenging because they bent it here and they bent the rod here for clearance, but the problem is they flex like crazy now, so you really need a carbon tube around them. What I had to do was cut it to the length I needed, remove the clevis, and then with a pair of pliers actually take this bend out. I straightened it, then slid the rod, the carbon tube over it. I put the bend back in and then put the clevis on. Then I put some CA. You can see right here, I put a glob of CA on this end and on this end, and I actually let the glue actually wick down with some thin CA down the center of the tube, and then hit it with some accelerator, and it locks those tubes in place. So it's definitely a great way to make the rod tougher and keep it nice and light. Now I'm going to go ahead and activate them for you so you can see. This is with my flap slowdown mechanism in there. And now the flaps are actually really tough. They used to just wiggle around like crazy, and now they don't. But anyway, guys, as far as the underside of the airplane goes, you can see here on the this wing here, I put rods on the flaps and the ailerons, those carbon rods, to really make them tougher. And of course the magnets on your hatches, guys. It's definitely the way to go to make this plane much more secure. Now to secure the wires in the wing panels, guys, I ran a length of Scotch tape all the way along the main wire bundle that was just sort of sticking out. That Scotch tape I then painted over with that green paint that I got mixed at Lowe's. And it really kind of helps get those wires to sort of disappear a little bit. Also, guys, the wire bundle that protrudes here for the ailerons, flaps, and the wing lights and landing lights, as I utilize these things, I would always pull it through this tape here. It would come up through the surface, and it was really hard to keep those in place. So what I did was, as you can see this little notch I put here, I took like a 2 or 3 millimeter rod. You can use a 256 rod, you can use a dowel rod or whatever, but I just cut a notch in there, contact cemented it in place. And what that does is it keeps this entire wire bundle, guys, from now coming up through the wing and just pulling through this tape and sort of ruining the finish of all this. It's just a real good way here, guys, to secure these wires. Probably the single coolest feature on this airplane is the retractable landing gear. It's very scale, it's all metal, all the wheels are ball bearing supported, as you can see here how nicely everything spins. It's very rugged, very scale, and has wheel brakes. All the doors articulate and work really just like a real airplane does. Now to give you a close-up of this wheel brake and the strut itself, you can see there's 2 screws here, and when you apply the brakes with a switch, what it does, it activates a solenoid, a magnet, and you can adjust how hard they brake or how lightly they brake by turning these 2 screws. You turn the screws in, it brakes less. You back the screws out, it actually brakes more. You don't want to back them out too much because they can actually fall out of the airplane, so you don't want to have them too loose. But as you can see here, with the flip of a switch, guys, the brakes are applied. Now, it doesn't stop that abruptly. It actually comes to a slowdown, and you activate the brakes with one switch, and then the plane will actually progressively come to a stop, which I'll probably show you in the flight demo video. But it's very, very impressive. All the doors here, guys, have very nice linkages to kind of lock everything into place. The nose gear strut has this separate door that opens, and then when the gear comes out, it closes, but this one little door stays open, which is really just like the real thing. Now let me go ahead and cycle the gear so you can see how nicely this stuff works. Alright, guys, very impressive. Now you can hear a little bit of that buzzing, guys. Digital servos in this thing. It's hard to get them all to stop buzzing, which again is one reason why I decided to put a large battery pack in there. And again, with the exception of a little bit of tweaking, guys, a little bit of tuning, it worked pretty much just like this out of the box. Let me go ahead and extend everything for you here so you can see what it looks like. Alright, very cool, guys, just like the real airplane. Overall, I'm just blown away by how cool this landing gear is. In addition to being very scale, guys, this landing gear also gets the job done, guys. You can see the compression that it has, and it's very, very useful for you know, the impact of landing, and also grass runways as well. Now you can see here the nose strut also compresses really nicely. I don't want to squeeze too hard because I could end up breaking it, but it has tremendous compression, guys, and it can really take a beating. Now a couple changes that I ended up making to mine, actually on my first taxi test out, what had happened was this little center section here, actually the one plastic piece in here is very weak, and it broke almost right away. And you can see I put a needle file in here and filed away the plastic. You can see that little half round section there. And what I did was I took a paper clip, and you can see I wrapped it all the way around this thing and all around the underside. And then I took some tie wraps, and I took the plastic off of the tie wraps, the twist ties, and I wrapped it around this thing. I added CA glue to the whole outside of this thing, and then just hit it with some kicker, and that solve the problem. They probably should have made this part out of metal, but they didn't. So again, I took this paper clip. You can see it's wrapped all the way around like a U shape. I just cut the paper clip in half and wrapped it around. The other thing that I added to mine as well was this spring right here. I drilled a little hole here, and at my local surplus shop got this one spring, and then I secured it to the bolt that's down in there. It's kind of tough to see. But what was happening is when my gear was retracting, my nose strut was going up, this over-center mechanism here was kind of binding and it wasn't letting the wheel go up. So by adding a spring right here, it helps pull this thing up and solve all of the nose gear problems. Now the thing comes up really nicely. Now, in order to give you guys another view of, give you an idea of what this additional spring does that I added to this thing, you can see here again, guys, just a little hole right through here with a spring attached. Spring goes up there and it just secures to the steering arm screw that holds that in place. This really, again, solves a lot of problems and helps this gear get up into the well. Let's go ahead and retract the gear so you can see what I'm talking about. All right, you see that spring helps pull that arm up. Outstanding, guys. So that spring, guys, will really help get you going and help set this thing up. Now, for a straight-on view, guys, I want to show you how this striker plate works and opens up this little door. It's really kind of neat to see. All right, you can see this striker plate right here, guys, and what happens when the door goes up. All right, outstanding. Very much like the real airplane, guys, designed to be very, very scale. A very, very cool detail that this airplane has. All right, folks, one final improvement that I made to my nose strut that really made a big difference. And this is in addition to the paper clip that we just saw that I wrapped around here with the safety wire and the glue, and also the spring that I added here. You can see right here I added a piece of safety wire on this piece of plastic. Now, they probably at the factory should have made a lot of this stuff out of metal, but they didn't. And you can see here where this thing is, has been cracking, and I had lots of cracks. It was starting to break. So by adding some safety wire around here and then putting CA around this thing, it's made it tough. And I've had lots and lots of flights, lots and lots of takeoffs and landings with this thing just the way it is. And it seems to hold together really well with that wire on there. You can see here I drilled a hole right here, and using some tie wrap material or safety wire, whatever you had, this is just a tie wrap that I tore the plastic off of, and I looped it through here 3 times, and then I tied it here in the center. And the thing is this entire thing has to rotate. You can see the strut has to rotate inside of that. But that wire makes it really tough. Again, I wrapped it with wire, and then I went ahead and I put a whole bunch of, I put some thin CA on it to start, then I put some thick gap filling like CA around it, just added a big covering around it, and then hit it with some kicker. And what you can see is that it adds a thick coating of glue around it. You can see right there in the front where it's actually tied together. But this thing makes this whole collar really, really tough. Now, as we look at this thing from the other side, you can see right here where this striker is for this small gear door. You can see I also had to drill a hole right here, guys, to feed those wires through. And as I go around to this side here too, you can see where that whole thing goes through. There's another hole here on the other side. So again, once you wrap that thing around there 3 times, saturate this whole thing with glue, being careful not to get glue on the struts, you know, using some thin CA first, and then using some thick or gap filling CA. This whole thing makes this collar nice and tough. And like I said, as you're seeing it now, with these 3 layers of tie wrap or 3 layers of safety wire around there, I've made dozens and dozens and dozens of landings with this thing like this, and it has proven to be a really good fix for making this thing a lot tougher. Here's a quick look at the bomb bay doors on the airplane, guys. Let me go ahead and open them for you. You can see how nicely they open up. They take a single servo down here, and using this sort of gear drive mechanism down here, it attaches the top of the servo and allows both of these things to drive 2 push rods to open it up with 1 servo. It's the same mechanism that they put on the 2 rear doors of the main gear as well to open both of those. Now you can see your rear light wire here, guys, running down here into this compartment. Now I didn't glue this in yet, but what I did was I made this little foam hatch, guys. And you can make it out of anything, and that's really just to cover all those wires that run up sort of into the cockpit. I'm going to glue it down and paint it a better color here, but just to give you an idea of what the inside of this thing looks like, and you can make that little hatch if you want to cover that up. When setting up your switches on your Futaba 8J radio, or really for whatever radio you might have, I have the following recommendations. For the brakes, if you have a spring-loaded switch that you can use, like this F switch, I would use that for your brakes. Now right now the brakes are off, but if I want them, I can activate them by pulling the switch up. And when I release it, okay, it releases the brakes. That's the best type of switch to hook up your brakes on. What that will ensure is that you do not land with your brake switch on. So spring load it into the off position for the brakes. Now in a real airplane, if you land with the brakes on, you pretty much destroy the airplane, so there's really not a reason to try and duplicate that on a model. So again, if you have a spring-loaded switch, set your brakes up on that. Landing gear is just on this switch here, guys. It's just big, it's easy to grab. You don't have to take your hand off the stick to retract the landing gear. And for the flaps, guys, I'm using this 3-position switch right here. You want to find a 3-position switch so you can have your flaps up, like you can see all 4 in the up position. You can put it one setting down. Now all 4 flaps come down for a sort of a takeoff position. Then you can put the switch all the way down, and now you have a landing position. Same thing in opposite, guys. Bring it up one setting for landing, and then all the way back up is flap 0. That's really a great way to set it up. Now, as far as the bomb bay door switch goes, you can use anything. I chose this large out-of-the-way switch, something that I'm not going to mess with. I usually fly with one finger between the two, so that'll keep the door in the up position. And if I want it, I can just flip the switch. But anyway, guys, if you have an 8J, that's a really great way to set up the switches for this airplane. It's important to note when balancing your airplane on the CG, getting it ready to fly, you want to balance it with the landing gear up, not when it's down. The reason for that is the landing gear is big and heavy, and they all shift backwards, all 3 of them. And what that does is it shifts your CG farther aft. So if you balance your airplane at 90 millimeters, just like it is, and you retract the gear swings back, and it probably shifts back to something like 95 or 100 or 105, or who knows how far back it shifts. But it goes from a stable CG to an unstable CG. Let's go ahead and look at that and see what the gear looks like when it goes up. All right, and you can see all that weight moves back, guys, and it's quite a weight shift. So it'll shift your CG farther back when you retract the gear. So the bottom line is balance the airplane just the way you see it now, guys, with the wheels up at 90 millimeters. Then when you extend the gear and it all comes forward, it'll be shifting your CG farther forward to a more stable condition rather than an unstable one. For those of you that have the ARF version of this airplane and are using the stock speed controllers like I am, it's not a bad idea to take this panel right here and very carefully just pry it away. The contact cement will easily come off, and then clean the contact cement off of here with a razor knife or something. And then go in here and with a hobby knife, you can see I already did it to mine. I took a hobby knife and very carefully just sort of cut around here and removed the heat shrink wrapping here off of the heatsink side of the speed controller. By doing this, you're going to allow this ESC to cool much more efficiently. With this thing blocking it, it just isn't going to cool down all that well. So once you take that this cover off, then you can just go ahead and put some contact cement back on these areas and just very carefully just glue this thing back into position. This will really ensure that your ESC really cools down very efficiently. One real critical item to note, guys, on the ARF version of the LX models B-25 is setting your ESC timing. They give you this instruction manual, and you can see the 6th parameter here is timing, and the stock timing is set up on medium timing. From the get-go, I actually had adjusted my timing over to the high timing setting, mostly because on the forums guys were saying the plane was underpowered in the default medium setting. The entire flight demo that you may have seen, or you can see the link at the end of this video, the flight demo where I narrate and talk and fly, that's done with stock propellers on high timing. So you see, if you set your programming on high, just follow this guide, the plane will have plenty of power to fly in the stock configuration. Alright guys, that pretty much concludes this video on the LX models B-25 Mitchell from Banana Hobby. You can check this airplane out at bananahobby.com. Overall guys, I'm real impressed with this thing. As you can see from the video, it's very big, it's very complex, it's very scale-like, awesome detail, but it builds well guys. It goes together easily. You have a few big glue jobs to do, but other than that, it's mostly wiring and screws and sort of just trimming it and tooting. Now, remember, guys, this is part 2 of a 3-part series, so be sure to check out the links at the end for the unboxing and the flight demo on this airplane. If I have any complaint about this airplane at all, it would probably be that it didn't come with pilots, which would have been kind of nice, and also like the paint job. The paint job, where it's painted on most of the foam, it's sort of a shiny shell-like paint that flakes off kind of easily. It doesn't really bond to the foam like some other models. It's a small thing. It's not a bad idea. I mean, it doesn't really bother me that much because I just airbrush and touch up anything anyway. But head over to Lowe's, have them match the paint for you or match it yourself, and you can just touch it up, and it's kind of not a big deal. But overall, guys, as you saw from the video, it builds really nicely. As big, complex, a scale as it is, it's actually very simple. It builds very simply. The construction is very simple. And this ARF version lets you put it together relatively quickly. Now, as you saw from the video, there's a lot of little things you can do to it, guys, to just improve it, increase the reliability of it, and make it even better than it already is. Overall, guys, I'm real impressed with this thing. I really like the airplane, and I think the manufacturer did a nice job getting it together. Anyway, guys, I appreciate you watching RC Informer and checking out this video. Check out RC Informer on YouTube, RCINFORMER.com, and RC Informer on Facebook. Thanks again for watching, guys, and as always, we'll see you next time.